This is Christine Sweet with the Plant-Based Review, and tonight we are down in Philadelphia at Cory Booker's 2020 local rally, Philadelphia Rise with Cory Booker. Though you may know him as Newark's mayor, Senator of New Jersey, you may not know that he has been actively embracing a plant-based lifestyle. We'll see if he takes the plant-based and vegan morals with him throughout the Democratic debates and to his presidency.
All right! This is the beauty of their introductions, is they stood up here in front of everybody and they shared their own story. They made themselves vulnerable. They talked about the struggle. And what I like about both of these artists is there's a long tradition in our country. We saw it in the civil rights movement. It goes way back to all of our movements for social justice. There have been artists at the center of it. And these are two artists who use their platform and their position, their artistry and their innovation to advance this country further, to tell the truth about who they are, where they've come from, and to try to inspire other people to make this nation who we say we are, a nation of liberty and justice for all. Would you give it up for both of them one more time? All right. So, look. I have to tell you, I am just out of South Carolina, where I was privileged to be in Mother Emanuel Church, and to give the historic church, not just historic for what happened tragically just a few years ago, where a white supremacist came in and murdered 9 beautiful Americans. But this is a historic church because it was burned to the ground and they rebuilt. It was illegal for African Americans after Denmark Vesey from that community led a slave rebellion. It was illegal for African Americans to gather, so they met in secret. This is a church that has seen tragedy visited upon it in multiple points in American history, but never stopped, never gave up, showed the redemptive power of love and forgiveness, showed what it means to live your values. And this is really what I want to talk about tonight, because, look, this is a time of hurt in this country. It's a time where I have town halls now through a lot of communities, and it's amazing to me because I have kids now, and I'm not exaggerating, about every five for five town halls I had through South Carolina, young kids, 7, 8, 9 years old, would stand up and say, raise their hand and ask me about gun violence. Where have we come as a nation where we have so capitulated to the violence in our communities that our way of dealing with it now seems to be that when we send our kids to school, they're learning about reading, writing, and arithmetic and shelter-in-place drills? What message are we sending them that this is how we're going to try to cope? It is a fear-based society that is toxic. But we know this is not the first time in our country that we have had to grapple with fear and divisiveness and hate. And so I'm standing here to tell you that the whole mission of my campaign, why I decided to run, because you all know the 2020 elections don't stand for the year, it stands for the number of people running. We got 2,020 people lining up to run. I'm looking at some of y'all just making sure. Some of you, I'm lucky, you're not 35 yet. There are a lot of people running, but I was very clear from the day I launched my campaign on February 1st that I'm not just running because of my policy plans and my ideas. That is really important. But I'm running really because I'm worried about the soul of our nation. I believe this is a moral moment in America. And I believe we are seeing now a leader in our country who is engaging what I call moral vandalism, is using the same words that white supremacists are now using, things like invasion, infestation, trying to tell American citizens to go back. Where are you talking about go back to? Newark? I don't know. For me, we are seeing language that is really trying to talk to what the character of our country is going to be. But I want to tell you right now, it's not about him. I want to be very clear. This election is not a referendum on one guy in one office. This election is a referendum on who we are and who we must be to each other. And so, I want to tell you right now, I am feeling very blessed to be here in Philly because I feel this connection to this city. Because I come from a tough city too. And in cities, you have this choice. And I'll tell you this, I always say I got my BA from Stanford, but my PhD in the streets of Newark. And my first grade teacher, a woman named Miss Virginia Jones, she was the tenant president of the projects I lived in for almost a decade. And I moved into that neighborhood at a law school, and I showed up with the kind of arrogance that a Yale law student might have, thinking that I was going to be this lawyer striding into town in one of the toughest neighborhoods in our city, and I was going to tell this woman, I was going to meet her, she was a tenant president, tell her, you know, who I was. And I remember knocking on the door, she opens the door, who are you? And I'm like, I'm Cory Booker, ma'am, I'm here to help. And she gave me this cynical look, like I was the one that needed some help. And she was right. You see, I had moved in a little while before, and I moved into a boarding house right next to a crack house, and was hearing shootings. Heck, when I was moving my stuff in, I came back to my car, my stuff was stolen. And I still remember I was a little intimidated. And so this woman looks at me, and I tell her I want to help her, and she brings me down to the street, Martin Luther King Boulevard. And she says, okay, tell me what you see. And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, if you want to help me, describe what you see. And I describe the crack house, the projects. I talked about it just like I mentioned before. And the more I talked, the more this woman looked just upset with me. And finally she goes, you can't help me. And she turns around and starts walking away. I run out after her and cut her off. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she looks at me with this directness, and she says to me, boy, you need to understand something. The world you see outside of you is a reflection of what you have inside of you. And if you're one of these people who surrenders, who only sees darkness and despair and problems, that's all there's ever going to be. But if you're one of those stubborn people who every time you open your eyes, you see hope, you see possibility, you see love, you see the face of God, then you can be one of those people that helps me. And she walks away, leaving me there on the street. Thinking to myself, okay, grasshopper, thus endeth the lesson. Think about this for a second. This is why I tell you, sometimes we look for leaders and we ignore the powerful people that are right there in our midst, who get up every day. Some people subscribe to this great man theory of history, like we are where we are because these men descended from Mount Olympus and led us forward. That is not true. We are all here because of a conspiracy of love, of extraordinary, humble heroes who got up every day and took care of the kids or went to work and still found time to fight for their neighborhood and fight for their community and stand up for the neighbor, stand up for the stranger, stand up for the people who are having their dignity assaulted. That's what heroism is. We all know sometimes heroism is not somebody who stands on the top of a building and roars. Sometimes the greatest act of heroism is that person that just gets up in the morning after a tough night, a shooting in their neighborhood, a family member struggling, pain visited upon them, and they define courage just by that power of just getting up in the morning and putting on your clothes and going out for another day of living and giving and serving. Now let me be clear. Let me be clear. Because that's what I learned from a woman on the 5th floor of the projects named Miss Virginia Jones. I was just this young guy in the 20s. And I learned that she, in the 80s, had her son murdered in the lobby of the building I would move into. You see, Miss Jones, when she was one of the people first pushed me to run for office, I ran for city council, then she said to me, boy, don't you ever forget who put you in office. Listen, she's passed away now, but she still scares me. That's why I am the only United States senator that lives in an inner city black and brown low-income community, because I would not leave. People, let me go on a side note for a second, because I get confused by my party sometimes. We poll Democrats, and you know what their number one issue is? We just want somebody who can beat Donald Trump. And I'm like, we got to have some bigger aspirations than that. Look, don't get me wrong. We got to beat Donald Trump. But beating Donald Trump is the floor. It's not the ceiling. Beating Donald Trump gets us out of the valley. It doesn't get us to the mountaintop. And in my neighborhood, a lot of the issues we're struggling with, that Philly's struggling with, that they're struggling in Pennsylvania from the rural areas to the urban areas, these issues have been going on long before Donald Trump has got elected. We have 3,000 jurisdictions, like my community, where children have more than twice the blood lead levels in Flint, Michigan. We have places like my community where folks on my block, in my neighborhood, work longer hours than my parents did, but still at my bodega on the corner, they still need food stamps to feed their family. We've had problems long since Donald Trump. Right across the street from me, this is why I was happy that Freeway told his story. Right across the street from me, there's a drug treatment center. I go over there and visit with the fellas from time to time. I bring some food. They get mad at me because it's vegan. Oh, I gotta love the vegan love. We are small but a mighty group. Some people think vegans are weak. No, we're not. It's embarrassing to have your butt kicked by a vegan. I mean that metaphorically, not sanctioning any kind of violence here. And so when I go over and sit with the fellas, they tell their story. This is a drug treatment center called Integrity House, and here are these guys that have been arrested dozens of times, put in jail for an addiction, for a disease, before they got help, before they got health care. That was going on before Donald Trump was elected. We can't define our party by what we're against. We need to define us by what we are for. Donald Trump does not define us. Our love defines us. And this is why I'm going back to Miss Jones. Her son is murdered in those buildings. She says to me, stay in the neighborhood, so I move into these high-rise projects. And when I didn't know before I moved in there that her son was killed, and I asked her, I remember saying to her, I heard your son was killed in the 80s. I know where you work. She worked for the county. She had a job. She could have lived a lot of other places in these low-income housing projects. And I said, why do you still stay here? And this woman looks at me as if she's angered by the question. She looks at me and she goes, because I'm in charge of Homeland Security. You see what she does? She takes responsibility. She knows in life, in this moral moment too, that there is no neutral. You can't be a spectator to American history. You can't look at the problems and have the courage to deplore them, but to do nothing about making the change. A lot of folks right now are arguing. I said this morning, like, why is it not suddenly the biggest question about, like, who is a racist and who's a not? That's not the question. We can't let our dealing with white supremacy and racism to devolve to a simplistic question like who's a racist, who's not. If racism exists in the world, the question is, are you doing something about it or not? It is, if there is bigotry, if there is hate, it's not enough to say I'm not anti-Semitic. You need to be anti-Semitism. It's not enough to say that I'm not a misogynist. If misogyny exists, you need to be anti-misogyny, because there is no neutral. King said it so brilliantly, better than I can. He said what we have to repent for in this day and age is not the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, it's the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. And that's what love is. People think it's sentimentality. I tell people all the time, patriotism is love of country, and you can't love your country if you don't love your fellow countrymen and women. But love is not a feeling. It's not a song. It's not, ooh, baby, baby. Once Bree told me she was going to talk tonight, I just got the feeling I need to sing a rap or something like that. No, love is sacrifice. Love is struggle. Love is looking at your fellow American and saying, if your kids don't have a great public school, then my kids are lesser off. That if your family doesn't have health care, it's an assault on my human dignity. Love says that we are all in this together, that I need to be your ally, I need to be your accomplice when it comes to justice, that we have work to do together. And that's what Ms. Jones was trying to say to me, that she had the most wretched thing imaginable visit upon her. Her child was murdered. And she taught me that hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. She taught me that we all have to make a choice right now. We can accept things as they are or take responsibility for changing them. And so I want to let everybody know, I'm running for president not just because of the quality of ideas, not just because, me and, Michael Bennett have different views on some of the issues. I can go through all the candidates and talk about some of our different views, but I'm trying to say to people, if we don't find a way in this country to heal, if we don't find a way to put more indivisible back into this one nation under God, if we don't find a way to change our common pain into common purpose, then we are never going to be able to deal with the bigger problems of climate change, the bigger problems of health care as a right for all Americans, the bigger problems like the assaults on public education, the bigger problems like making sure our veterans in the country that sing songs like our national anthem that literally ends with home of the brave, but yet our veterans are disproportionately homeless. What allows these things to fester in our nation is a lack of courageous empathy, is a failure of civic grace, is the inability for us to be who we say we are, a nation that will love one another, sacrifice for one another, and realize that there is not a right destiny and a left destiny, a Republican destiny and a Democratic destiny. There is one destiny in this nation. And so I want to let you all know this. It is going to be a difficult fight ahead. And there are people, I don't vilify or demonize anybody, but there are days, I have to say, when I know the majority of gun owners in America literally agree we should have universal background checks, but we have a leader in the Senate that won't even put the bill on the floor for a vote. I get upset. There's nothing wrong with being upset. There's nothing wrong with anger. When we have some companies that want to profiteer off of the pain of people and jack up their prescription drug prices 100 times, 200 times higher in this country than they have sell the same drug in another nation, I get upset. When I see shrines on pavements in my community to children that were killed, I get upset. But we cannot ever make an advancement in a nation if we're just pointing our fingers at other people. Let me be honest with you. I had to get upset at some of the folks who believe like me and stand like me. I'll never forget. It was 2008, and I want you all to know I miss Obama. Hold on. Y'all up in the Kool-Aid, you don't know the flavor. I miss Obama, and I miss her husband too. I am Team Michelle. Don't get it twisted. But when I was going to vote for Michelle's husband in 2008, I was the then I was then the mayor of the city. And I rolled up on the polling place. I had this big SUV. I had police officers next to me. And this, Newark, they don't call us a city of brotherly love. We're Brick City. We're hard. And so I roll up on the end of the line, and I know how y'all treat people down here. There was no hello, mayor, historic day, mayor, nice to see you, mayor. No, I walk up to the end of the line, and the woman at the end of the line looks at me. This is one of my constituents, one of my neighbors. She looks at me, and she goes, "Don't you think you're cutting in line now? I don't care who you are. You ain't special. You're waiting like the rest of us." And I'm the mayor of the city. I got police officers next to me. I look at this woman, and I go, "Yes, ma'am." 1 year later, it's a gubernatorial election in New Jersey. And I go to vote, and there's nobody at the polling place. I walk in, and I hug the poll worker because she looks lonely. And that election, narrowly, the incumbent Democrat lost, narrowly. We had high turnouts in just my city, maybe one other. We would have had a different outcome. And people want to blame other people or complain about the policies then that they don't agree with. I'm telling you right now, we cannot descend into blame. This is a time we have to accept responsibility. And we have to really look at ourselves in the mirror and understand that this is going to be an election that defines our culture. And not just by what they do or what he does, but by how we act and how we treat one another. What energy we bring into the world. Y'all, I got to give you the example. I am running into an Iowa town hall. We were so excited. So many people showed up. And just before I ascend to the stage, big guy sees me. I'm a big guy. He puts his arm around me, and he sees me. I think he recognized, I'm a former tight end for Stanford, former All-American football player. The older I get, the better I was. And he puts his arm around me and he says, "Dude, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face." And I look at him and I go, "Dude, that's a felony, man." We are not going to beat Donald Trump by taking on his tactics, using his terms, and fighting on his turf. That's not how you beat demagoguery. That's not how you beat hate. Every generation of our nation has had demagogues and hate mongers. The gardens of our democracy have never been free of those weeds. But how did we upend them? How did we overcome? The way we did that, was not by doing like they did to us. You know what King says, darkness can't drive out darkness. Hate can't drive out hate. We beat Bull Connor in Birmingham, not by bringing bigger dogs and more powerful fire hoses. We beat him by artists of activism who called to the consciousness of a country, who called to the moral imagination of a nation, who excited people to be energized and engaged and get involved, who built new coalitions, who called us together to rainbow alliances. That's what this moral moment demands. And so I want to end on a heavy note. Because I'm not going to tell you that it's going to be easy. That there won't be days that the hurt gets so grave. And so I want to end with that incredible hero of mine, Miss Virginia Jones, where I started. 2004, I will never forget, my dad was visiting me for my birthday. And we were walking in my neighborhood up the street, 18th Avenue in Newark, New Jersey. And suddenly gunshots rang out. I heard the shots and I ran towards where they were, and a friend of mine who was an off-duty police officer, he was there too. We both ran up the hill, and there was a teenager shot in his chest. We lay him on the grass, and then I went through the most gruesome, trying to stop a human being from bleeding to death. And I'll never forget, foamy blood was coming out of his mouth. I don't know what to do. I'm screaming, call the ambulance. I'm reaching my hand in his mouth, trying to clear away the blood and the foam, hoping he would just take a breath. By the time the ambulance got there, shoved me out of the way, I knew he was gone. My dad had been waiting down the hill, and I went over to him and I told him to go back where I was living in the projects. I said, go back to Brick Towers, wait for me. And I'll never forget, I waited for the police director, for the former mayor. He says to this day, I looked like I was in shock. I'd never seen a human being bleed out before. And I don't know I'm not a dad, and I don't know what it's like when my father opened the door and sees the son that he loves covered in another boy's blood. And my dad he's funny, he's light-spirited, his energy is great, but I could see his pain in his eyes as he looked at the pain in mine, and I didn't want to talk to him. I sort of pushed past him and went into the bathroom and locked the door, and then I just started trying to scrub another boy's blood off my hands. And then I broke. I felt such anger. I swear I felt so angry at us. Another black boy dead in America, and nobody seems to care. The majority of homicide victims in this nation, young black men. And I was so angry that it seemed to go on and on and on, thousands and thousands, and we weren't doing the things to stop it. And I looked in that mirror and started crying tears of rage and hurt, and I jumped in that shower, and I know folk here have had this moment where you turn the water on so hot that you hope that the hurt on the outside can numb the pain on the inside. I remember going to bed that night and just don't know how I slept, but I know in my faith is this idea that weeping will endure through the night, but joy can come in the morning. And I got up early the next morning, still not wanting to have that heart-to-heart with my dad, and so I stole out early. And I went into the elevators, the rickety old elevators in Brick Towers. I don't remember if they were working or not. Maybe I took the stairs, but I remember getting down into that lobby. And as I was walking through the lobby, I remembered in the back of my mind that this was the lobby that Miss Jones's son was killed in. And when I walked out in the courtyard, the sun had just come up. It was quiet and peaceful in the morning, and there was one person in the courtyard. She was across from me, and it was Miss Jones. Her back was towards me. It was as if I was under 100 feet of water, screaming in my insides. It's as if she heard me. Suddenly, Miss Jones turns around, and our eyes meet. Now, this woman is like 5 feet and a smidgen tall, and I'm 6'3", little overweight. Got the same doctor as Donald Trump, so I only weigh 200 pounds. She and I see each other, and she does the only thing I need at that moment. She opens her arms, and I run across that courtyard like a little kid, and we grab each other, and she's now just holding me and rubbing my back, and I start crying again. And as she's rubbing my back, she says 2 words. And they're the 2 words I want you to leave here thinking about. She says 2 words over and over again, 2 words. And they have nothing to do about religion or pie in the sky when you die. They have everything to do about who we are and how we've got here generation after generation through wretchedness and pain, through hate and demagoguery, but how yet we still advanced as a people, overcoming. She rubbed my back and said these 2 words that I repeated time and time on my toughest days when I would eventually become mayor. 2 words that I held on to on tough days in the Senate when I feel like I'm banging my head against implacable walls of resistance. 2 words that I even now say on the campaign trail when I feel really tired on some days. And they're 2 words I want to leave you thinking about today, because as this elderly woman rubbed my back over and over again, what she said to me was simply this: stay faithful, stay faithful, stay faithful. We have come this far by faith as a nation. faith in our ideals and our principles. We have come this far by faith. But faith without works is dead. And so this is an election that is a test of the American faith. Will we work together? Will we strive together? Will we stay faithful in the course of our ancestors? And if we live like that and work like that and love like that, I promise you that our tomorrows will be better than our yesterdays. I promise you that we will have a nation where justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. I promise you, we may be low right now, but if we stay faithful, then we will rise. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
1 in 5 children are considered obese, and processed meat is a class 1 carcinogen next to cigarettes. What would you do as president to promote a plant-based diet across America?
Well, what I'm going to do is promote health and well-being. We have a system right now that treats illness and disease more than it does prevention and intervention and helping people to lead healthy lives. And so we have a healthcare system right now that is so broken, and that's why it's so expensive. And part of the healthcare system is the food system. And we need to start talking about what's happening with these massive corporate industries taking over independent American farmers who are doing practices that actually are not good stewards of the land, poisoning our rivers and our lakes. And we're incentivizing through ag bills and like that practices that make us less healthy, that often make incentivize the wrong things, that make a kid who goes into a bodega have a Twinkie product be less expensive than a tomato. So we have to start talking about health systems, which includes healthcare, which includes our food systems, includes issues of environmental justice, because the toxins and the endocrine disruptors that are in our water and in our air, all of this has to be talked about. And so I have a very holistic view of what it means to be healthy. And one thing is we're going to stop using taxpayer dollars to subsidize things that make us ill and make us unhealthy.
Right over here to Joe.
Hi, Joe. What did you do to become such friends with her?